the uranium sale to Russia and the way it was done, so underhanded, with tremendous amounts of money being passed, I actually think that's Watergate modern age.
Is it? Here with his take, former foreign policy advisor for the Obama administration, David Tafuri. All right, David, you heard what the president had to say. Modern age Watergate. Is he right?
First of all, so as a foreign policy advisor to the Obama campaign, not in the administration, President Trump is not right about that. And he's using this now to distract from the case that's much more similar to Watergate, which is the potential involvement of his campaign with Russia in influencing our election. But
So,
let me tell you why.
No. I do not understand how a deal like this happens. I've said that from the beginning. I'm a business journalist. I know how tough it is to get a cross-border transaction done. I know what goes into that from a legal standpoint, from a business standpoint, and from a regulatory standpoint. How is it that all of these agencies, including Hillary Clinton's State Department, David, signed off on a deal that would allow the Russians to have control of 20% of our uranium supply?
Well, you hit the key point. It wasn't just Hillary Clinton's State Department. There were 9 agencies, all of which cleared on this, and the agency heads voted in approval of it. Now, there's a CFIUS process.
No, what does that tell you about how those agency heads were viewing Russia at the time?
Well, they viewed Russia differently than most people view Russia now.
Why didn't they view Russia as a threat?
Because Russia was a threat then, but it's much more of a threat now. 2010, but in 2010, that's before Russia had invaded Ukraine. It's before it had annexed Crimea. It's before it went into Syria and started fighting with the forces on the ground in Syria that we were supporting.
Everybody knew they wanted to do that. David, everybody knew what Russia was up to. Everyone knew what Russia wanted to do. Everyone knew that Russia was a potential threat.
Well, I agree with you. Everyone knew Russia was a potential threat, but it wasn't as much of a threat at that time.
Really? Because I was looking at an article, by the way, David, in cover of the Foreign Affairs Journal put out by the CFR. Everybody in foreign policy reads this. Back in 2007, Yulia Tymoshenko wrote a very good piece on the threat of Russia. And she said many believe the principles behind Kennan's policy of containment are still applicable today and see a new Cold War, this time against Vladimir Putin's resurgent Russia in the offing. She said Russia's imperial ambitions, they have not vanished. She goes on to talk about all of the challenges that Russia will present in terms of wanting to take over Ukraine, etc. You had Condoleezza Rice, a Russian scholar who was there in the White House. It seems to me, David, that it wasn't until Mr. Obama became president that suddenly Russia was no longer such a big deal, no longer a threat. Why?
Well, again, Trish, I think we agree that Russia was a threat then. It's just much more of a threat now because of the actions that Putin has taken. We thought maybe he'd take these actions, but now he's actually taken them.
You don't think it had anything to do with the $146 million?
He actually invaded a sovereign country in Ukraine. He actually went into Syria and started supporting a war criminal
because he was allowed, David, because nobody stood in his way. The Obama administration allowed Russia to flourish. This is what Yulia Tymoshenko was warning everyone against way back when in 2007. I remember the 2008 Lobster Summit in Kennebunkport, Maine, which I covered. And Putin was there alongside Bush. And there was a lot of concern at the time that Putin did have expansionist tendencies. Again, Condoleezza Rice on staff. It just seems to me, David, everyone knew. And yet the president, eventual President Obama, was laughing this off. Telling Mitt Romney, take your 1980s foreign policy back. People did know the Obama administration and Hillary Clinton, as his Secretary of State, chose to ignore it. And I just wonder, David, does that have anything to do with the $146 million being awarded to the Clinton Foundation by the Russians?
Well, I mean, we have to draw our own conclusions about that. Again, we agree that Russia was a threat then, and that there should have been recognition of that. And I also agree with you that it was a bad policy decision for the CFIUS committee to pass on this deal and say that this deal was okay, in which we provided a Russian company the authority to take over a company in Canada that had access to our uranium reserves. That was a mistake, but that was a mistake that was approved.
Nobody cares prepared. I mean, Loretta Lynch knew about it. Chuck Grassley sent her a letter. We had the letter. We shared an excerpt with the viewer just yesterday. In other words, there were plenty of alarm bells going off. And now you have a guy who's got the NDA agreement. He's not allowed to talk, but he's trying to change that because he also was sounding the alarm bells saying, guys, this isn't right. And I guess I just questioned, David, why the sudden change in our policy? We were worried about Russia and then we suddenly weren't. And I just question whether that had anything to do with Hillary Clinton maybe thinking, well, I'm Secretary of State, and why on earth would I be worried about Russia when they're giving my husband $500,000 for a speech or $146 million to our charitable foundation?
Those things need to be looked into. So far, there's no evidence to suggest that any of those things actually influence Hillary Clinton. And even if it influenced Hillary Clinton, Hillary Clinton then would have had to influence the 8 other heads of agencies who also agreed to this. There was a unanimous support for this decision.
This guy was out there tracking some of the dirty money that was going back and forth between people in Russia associated with the atomic energy business and people on the other side. I mean, the other thing I'd only point out, David, in all of this is that we also had an FBI investigation going on that was looking into whether or not Vladimir Putin wanted to expand his reach in our atomic energy industry. So if you've got an investigation like that going on, how on earth is CFIUS or anybody else saying, okay, go ahead with the deal?
Well, you're right. And that's the new news. That's why this old deal is back in the news, is because we now know that there was a criminal investigation going on. That criminal investigation was not into anything related to Hillary Clinton or Bill Clinton or the administration. It was related to a trucking firm, and the trucking firm was engaging in bribery in cahoots with Russia. Now, we know that FBI investigation was going on before the CFIUS approval, but what we don't know yet is if the FBI communicated to anyone on the CFIUS committee that it was investigating this.
I mean, that seems like an obvious thing to do. But one hand's got to talk to the other.
I agree with you. If the FBI communicated that, then that should have been taken into account by the CFIUS committee, and the CFIUS committee should have been even more reluctant to provide approval. But again, we don't know yet if the FBI communicated that. We don't know, but I'll tell you, David, and we should find out.
It does not pass the smell test. You know, again, you heard Capri Cafaro talking about basic ethics. One basic tenet of ethics would be, okay, maybe my husband shouldn't get that big old payday from Russia, 500 grand, weeks after a deal like that closes. It just doesn't look right, if nothing else. And in many cases, perception is reality. David, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you.